Hello everyone and welcome to this live stream tutorial. In this video we are going to be creating a replica of Bomberman inside of Unity, and it's going to look something like this once we're done. So if I go ahead and hit play here, we should be able to use our mouse, and ignore this error, it has something to do with the editor, not the game. I should be able to use the mouse here to click and place bombs on different tiles, and the bombs will then recognize where it's placed and create an explosion so that it doesn't overlap with the walls that it cannot destroy, but it should also go ahead and dynamically destroy the elements that it can destroy. So just like in the original Bomberman game. And it should be really easy for you to go in and add a character controller here that goes around and places bombs instead of using the mouse, because our entire environment is actually set up using the Unity Tilemap system. So we're basically just modifying that at runtime. And as you can see, we do have a collider in here. So all of the wall elements and all of the destroyable elements here should have colliders. And so right away, if you go ahead and place a rigid body in here, in fact, we can go ahead and try that. Let's just try creating a rigid body in here at runtime. This is probably going to go wrong, but I'm just going to do it anyway. So we're going to create a 2D object sprite here. And I'm just going to select some kind of sprite. Let's just do a bomb. Whoops. Everything is not working. There we go. And we can move up the bomb here, which I now called W. Let's just call it bomb. And we place it at the top, and we add a collider to it. So we're going to do a circle collider. We should actually be able to see this collide with our environment. And this is not tested, guys, so I hope this will work, but we're going to add a 2D rigid body. And there you go. As you can see, it kind of lands on the floor here. And as you can see, it kind of falls down, and yeah. So everything is set to work with colliders. And if we go ahead and say destroy part of the environment here, you can see these colliders get removed. Okay, that example actually turned out way better than I thought it would. So I'm really happy about that. But yeah, so let's dive right into the tutorial. Also, towards the end, we'll do a Q&A. So make sure to watch the video all the way through, because we're going to be answering questions at the end like we always do. So now we can go File, Open Project, because I've actually gone ahead and prepared kind of a starter project. The reason why is I wanted to just include all the sprites I'm going to be using to have all of the tiles set up appropriately. Also because I'm using rule tiles. And I'm going to show you what this is in a second, and I'm going to refer you to a video as well as a place where you can download this starter project. So don't worry, you can learn all about it. There's no black magic in this. It's just for convenience, I've gone ahead and created this project. And as you can see, I already have mine sitting on my computer here. But if you want to download it yourself, I do have a link for that. And for the people watching on YouTube, there will of course be a link in the description. And to the people watching on Twitch, I have a link that you can check out in the chat right there. And I would ask the admins to go ahead and copy it and have it ready if people ask at a later point, because I'm not going to be able to focus on pasting that in different places. But yeah, there is a link to the starter project. And this is what the starter project looks like. As you can see, we just have a completely empty scene. There's nothing in here other than a main camera, but I also have a tile palette set up called Bomberman. And if this window isn't open for you, you can always go Window and select Tile Palette, and that should open it up. And in here, I've configured a few different tiles. And you can see those under the Tiles folder right here. We have the wall tile, that's that one right here. Just a static tile with a single sprite. We have the destructible, that's that one right here. The same thing, just a simple tile with a single sprite. And then we have the dirt and wall filler. And these are more complicated, as you can see, because these are what we call rule tiles. And these allow us to set up rules for how our tiles should look depending on how we paint with them, depending on what tiles are nearby. And this allows us to really easily paint good looking environments where the tiles correspond to each other. I've talked about how to set up tiles and how you can get rule tiles because it's not included with Unity by default, and all that stuff, and how to use tile maps in general in a video I just created called Tile Maps in Unity. So if you want to learn more about how to paint with tile maps and set all that stuff up, I would definitely recommend you check out that video. I of course also have a link to that in the description. So with that, we can actually go ahead and create a tile map now. So in order to create a tile map, we go to the hierarchy, we right click, we go to the object, and we select tile map. And this creates a grid where we can configure the size of the grid, as well as a tile map object. And as I've explained in the video I did, a tile map is basically like a layer in Photoshop. So we can go ahead and paint stuff onto a tile map, and we can create multiple tile maps and layer them on top of each other if we want to have depth, sort of say, in our tiles. So this tile map we can actually go ahead and paint onto right away. We do that by selecting the brush tool here and hitting B. We want to select the appropriate palette here. I only have one called the Bomberman, which is included in the project. And I'm going to go ahead and select, say, the dirt here to the left. Now, as you can see, this is a ruled tile, and this means that if I go ahead and paint with it, you can see that it automatically chooses a sprite that is appropriate for the position or for the tile, depending on the nearby tiles. So that's pretty cool. Instead of us having to go in and select a corner, select a side, select a filler, and all that stuff that you would normally do in order to create kind of corresponding tiles. So we'll go ahead and use this to sketch out our level. And I'm going to make this fairly wide here, something along these lines. And I'm actually just going to make it completely square. Is this completely square? This is not completely square. This is completely square, I believe. There we go. And I'm going to hit G in order to fill out the entire thing. There we go. And click with my mouse. And then switch back to B in order to change back to brush mode. I'm just going to make sure that the size of this is correct. So if we imagine that we have walls all the way around here, and we then go ahead and place 1, 2, 3, 4 wall pieces, and then we have another wall. So this is the correct size of the level that I want to make. Then we can select the wall filler, this one here, and I'm just going to fill out with this all the way around here. I'm actually going to do another patch at that, just so that it isn't completely empty around our level. So if we go ahead and look in the game view, whoa, for some reason our main camera is a bit zoomed in here, and it isn't really positioned in a way that I'd like. So I'm just going to take the main camera, I'm going to move it over here by 0.5 on the X in order to be exact. And I'm also just going to change the size of the camera here in order to kind of zoom it out. And we can also move it down by 0.5 or negative 0.5 on the Y here, just to center it on our level. And that actually looks pretty decent. I'm actually going to zoom it in a bit more, something around there. We can definitely go in here and add more wall filler in order to make sure that no matter what screen size we use, that we are going to fill everything out with sprites so that it doesn't look weird and glitchy. There we go. So now we should see that our level looks just fine. And this is kind of the background of our level. This is kind of what we want everything else to be painted on top of. So we can go ahead and select our tile map and rename it to tilemap_, and I'm going to call this background. And because this is a background, we are going to set the ordering layer for our tilemap render to -1. So now it's going to be drawn underneath everything else. Then we can right click on our grid here, go to the object and select tilemap again. And we've now created another layer. And this one is going to be tilemap_gameplay. This is where all of our gameplay tiles, the ones that actually affect our players, are going to be. And this is of course the destructible environment and the walls. So let's start by painting some walls here. I still have the brush selected, but do note that you don't need to select the tilemap in the hierarchy. Instead, you need to go under active tilemap and choose the one that you want to paint to. So I'm going to change this to tilemap gameplay, select the wall, and now I should be able to paint with the wall. So I'm going to go ahead and paint some walls. Whoops. And if you miss and misclick or something, you can always hold down Shift in order to remove. There we go. And I'm going to place in all of the walls inside of our level square here. And there we go. This now looks like a completely typical Bomberman level. Cool. So now we've actually kind of created the whole base for our game. This is how incredibly simple it can be to create levels using this tilemap system. The next thing that we want to do is make sure that all of our levels are all of the elements in our level are sort of interactable. In other words, we want to add colliders to each of these wall pieces so that if we go ahead and create, say, a player character, he will be able to collide with them. So let's go ahead and hit add component. And in here, we're going to create a tilemap collider 2D. And as you can see, this goes ahead and actually creates, as you can see, it outlines each one of these elements with a green line. And this is, of course, a collider. You can also see it creates lines between each one of these elements. And that's because it's actually creating a box collider for each element, which is not very performant. So instead, what we want to do is actually go in here and add another component that will automatically combine all of these colliders in an effective way. And this is what we call I've actually forgotten what it's called here. Let's go into physics 2D and let's select it's in here, composite collider. Yes. So the composite collider 2D. And this automatically creates a rigid body. And this doesn't mean that we need our tilemap to move in any way. We can simply set the body type to static. And now it really is as if the rigid body wasn't there. It's not going to apply any forces or anything. It knows this object is not going to move. And then we can go to the tilemap collider and we can hit used by composite. And right away, you can see all of the green lines between the different parts disappear. And we now have one uniform line going all the way around for the wall tiles that are next to each other. And this is actually happening at runtime. So if at runtime we were to change our tilemap, our composite collider will change the way that it generates. Really cool. And this also means that we can go ahead and now paint more elements. So if we want to paint with the destructive tile here, we can actually just go in here, and as you can see right away, the collider updates. So I'm just going to paint a bunch of destructible elements in here so that we can see it working later and it will look really cool. And I'm just going to scatter these throughout. This is not really about creating an interesting level as much as it is a demo. But there we go. We now have some elements in here. And as you can see, the collider again has updated for all of these. One thing that you do need to know about when creating colliders for your tilemap is that you need to set up what sort of collider you want each tile to have. So if we go to our, say, wall here, we can actually change the collider type of our wall. And as you can see, I've set mine to grid. If you select none, no colliders are going to be generated for this element. And as you can see, if I select it now, all of the wall elements are ignored by our collider. This is definitely not what we want. If we select sprite, it's going to generate a collider based on the sprite. So for example, for this destroyed wall part here, or this destructible part, it's actually going to generate a collider that goes around all the details of the sprite. We don't want that. We simply want a square collider. And so we choose grid. And this simply creates a collider that is completely square and is the same size as the grid element. And this is what I want for both the wall and the destructible. And then for the dirt and the wall filler, not that we are applying any colliders on these elements because they're on the background, but I do definitely want to go ahead and simply set those to none. I don't want any collision on these elements whatsoever. So that's how you can configure it for individual tiles. So now that we have set up our environment in the way that we want, it's time to start actually doing things through script. And the first thing that we want to do is being able to spawn in bombs. So let's actually create a bomb. To do that, we'll go under the sprites here and let's take the bomb that is included in the project and let's drag it right into our scene. Ash, whoops. Something weird happened there. Created a material. Game object kind of disappeared. Did it make a tile out of it? That was weird. I have no idea what just happened. Do any of you guys? It seems that the tilemap renderer for some reason took on the material created for the bomb here. Okay, so we're probably just going to go ahead and select sprites default for that one, and everything is back to normal. That was very weird. I have no idea what happened. But instead of dragging it in here, we can probably just drag it into the hierarchy? Yes. Okay, so now I created our bomb and we can see it in our game. We also want to make sure that our bomb is always overlaid on top of our gameplay layer. So let's go ahead and set the ordinary layer to 1 here. Then we can actually move our element here. Whoops, I'm going to switch into 2D mode here. And just let's place it at the center of our scene here. This is kind of how it's going to look like, this is kind of how it's going to look like when we create a bomb. And the main thing that we want to happen for this bomb is that after a little while, we of course want it to explode. So we're going to have some kind of explosion component on our bomb. But let's create that later. For now, let's just take this bomb and turn it into a prefab. So let's create a folder inside of our project for prefabs. And let's drag it right in there. There we go. So now we can remove it from our scene. And we can go ahead and create a bomb spawner. So let's right click in our hierarchy, create an empty object, and this is where we'll put our bomb spawner. Let's reset the transform and call it bomb spawner. And then we can add component, and we're going to create a bomb spawner script of type C#, and let's say create and add. And now we can double click this to open it up in Visual Studio. And while it's waiting or booting up here, I'm just going to have a look at the chat to see if everything is working. Looks like it. That's awesome. And yeah, let's just go ahead and continue with the video then. So the first thing that we want is, because we're going to be working with tilemaps, we're going to be using Unity Engine.tilemaps. You always want to do this when you want to use or work with tilemaps in scripting in Unity. We can, however, delete the 2 top namespaces there. We're not going to be using those. We can also remove the start function. We won't be using that either. But what we want is a reference to our tilemap gameplay layer. The reason why is that when we go ahead and create a bomb, let's say that we go ahead and Unity is lagging out here. So let's say that we go ahead and click and want to place a bomb right in the middle here on this tile. We don't want the bomb to actually appear right where our mouse clicked. That way, if we click that in the corner here, it would actually overlay some of the other tiles. No, we want it to snap to the center of the tile that we clicked on. So even though we click in the corner of the tile, it should snap right to the center. To do this, we of course need a reference to a tilemap in order to determine where the center of the given tile is. So let's create a public tilemap, and this is going to be our tilemap. We can just call it that. We're also going to want a public game object, which is going to be, of course, a reference to our bomb prefab, what we want to actually spawn. Then inside of our update mode, let's check if we get a mouse button down. So if we get a mouse button press. To do that, we use input.getMouseButtonDown. And the mouse button that we want to check for is just the left mouse button, which is index of 0. So if we press our left mouse button, well, actually I just need to rearrange something on my other screen here. 1 second. Okay, cool. So if we press our mouse button, we want to go ahead and first of all get the position that we pressed. So we can use camera.main.screen-to-world-point in order to convert input.mousePosition into world coordinates. So input.mousePosition gives us the position of our mouse in screen coordinates, which is the amount of pixels on the X and the Y from the, I think it's upper left corner, but it could be lower left corner, but I'm pretty sure it's upper left corner. And we convert that into a world position by using this function. Then we can store this position as a vector 3. So we'll create a vector 3, call it world position and set it equal to that. Then we want to go ahead and take this world position and convert it into a cell. In other words, what tile, and we refer to a tile on a grid as a cell. So what cell did we press? Well, to do that, we use another handy function called tilemap.world2cell. So this takes just in our ordinary world position and converts it to a cell position. And a cell position is actually also stored, oops, my phone going off now. A cell position is actually also stored as a vector 3, but not a normal vector 3. So we can go ahead and write vector 3 here and call it cell and set it equal to our tilemap.world2cell. But the cell here can be stored in a vector 3, but what we normally use here is a vector 3 int. And the reason why is that cells or cell numbers are always referred to in whole numbers, in integers. We cannot have a half cell. So using this data type here is simply faster. It's simply easier to store because we don't need to store decimal places for each of the 3 numbers. They're all integers. That's the only difference here. And finally, we need to get the center position of this cell. So now we've determined on our grid here, that we have which cell on this grid did we press. And now we need to find, say we press the center here, now we need to find the center position of this cell. And to do that, we simply need to go tilemap.getCellCenterWorld. And here we input again a position of the cell, so this cell here. And this is going to again be a vector 3. And for this, we of course want to have decimal places, so it's going to be a normal vector 3. And we'll call this the cell center position. All right, so now we've chewed through kind of all the calculations that we need to do. First, converting from our screen space, which is where our mouse position is, to a world position. That's what we do here. Then converting from a world position to a cell, finding the right cell, then converting from the cell to the center world position of that cell. And finally, we can go ahead and instantiate our bomb. So we can instantiate a bomb prefab at the cell center position with no rotation. So quaternion.identity. And if we now save this and go into Unity and hit play, we should see that we have no errors. Fingers crossed. Okay, so I clicked play twice, so it actually unplayed. But now, if I click, okay, I know that we're going to get an error now because we didn't actually refer it to the bomb prefab. So there we go, but it is working, I promise you. So we can go back into our bomb spawner. We need to reference, first of all, our tilemap, which is going to be tilemap gameplay. And then under prefabs, we're going to reference our bomb prefab. There we go. And if we now hit play and try and place a bomb, yes! So you can see no matter where I press on some of these tiles, a bomb is actually going to be pressed. Of course, it doesn't explode yet, but that is kind of an introduction to working with some of these positions when it comes to tiles. How do you place game objects on tiles? How do you kind of refactor some of these positional data? So yeah, I think that was a pretty important thing to learn when working with tile maps. You will also note that we can place bombs on pretty much all tiles in our entire tile map. So we're not really doing any checking to see if the place is bomb compatible. And you could definitely do that, but I don't think it's important here because the only thing that's going to be placing bombs is your character, and he's never going to be able to move to these locations. So yeah, you might do that if you want to go all in, but I don't think it's necessarily something you need to do. Cool. So now that we are placing bombs in the right positions, it's time to go ahead and make these bombs explode. And of course, in order to make them explode, we need to have some kind of a countdown timer. But right before we create that, I'm just going to have a look in the chat here and see if I'm still streaming or if I'm just talking to myself. Okay, so things are going good. Awesome. The next thing that we will do is create a bomb script. So we'll go to our prefabs bomb and we'll create another component here. And this is going to be the bomb script. Oops, bomb. and we'll hit create an ad, and we'll double click it to open it up in Visual Studio. And this is definitely going to be the simplest script that we'll be writing today. The only thing that we want to do is replace the start method with some kind of public float, which we'll call our countdown. And we'll default this to say 2 seconds. Then inside of our update method, so every frame, we want to go ahead and reduce our countdown by time.delta time. In other words, each second, we're going to reduce our countdown variable by 1. And so this is going to count down for 2 seconds. And we can go ahead and check if countdown reaches 0 or goes below 0. Well, then we actually want to go ahead and explode. But before we do that, we actually need some way of having the bomb explode. So right now, let's just write a debug.log saying boom, as well as a destroy call. Oops, I did not input the correct symbol there. As well as a destroy call that is going to remove this game object. So right after we say boom in the console, we're going to destroy the bomb game object and it's going to be no more. Cool, so let's save that and let's make sure that it's applied to our prefab and everything. And that we get no errors. Yes, and then we can hit play. And now we should be able to see that if I click, it waits 2 seconds, it says boom, and the bomb is gone. Perfect. So now we have the kind of timing of the bombs perfected, and the only thing left really now is creating the actual map destroyer script. And I'm just going to go ahead and place this on the grid, but you can really place it anywhere that you'd like. Let's call it map destroyer. And let's say create an ad, and let's double click it to open it up. And this is going to be a bit longer, this script, but it's not necessarily going to be more complicated than what we've already done. So the first thing that we want to do is get rid of both our functions. We're not going to be using any of the default Unity functions. We'll also go ahead and use Unity Engine, you guessed it, .tilemaps. And finally, we're going to get a reference, a public tilemap to our tilemap. And we can just go ahead and call that tilemap as well, because we are going to be modifying our gameplay tilemap. So we need a reference to our gameplay tilemap. And now we need a couple of functions. Let's create a public void, which we'll call explode. And this is going to take in a vector 2 with the position where we want to explode. And this is going to be a position in world coordinates. So we could also just call this world pos just to be a tiny bit more specific. That's probably a good idea. And the first thing that we want to go and do is convert this world position that gets inputted into this function into a cell, the cell of the origin of the explosion. So we'll use tilemap.world to cell in order to find the right cell. We'll input the world position that was passed in, and we'll go ahead and store this as, again, a vector3 int called the origin cell, which just looks or sounds so incredibly cool. Origin cell. It sounds like something taken right out of the Matrix. We've achieved the origin cell and we're ready to proceed. All right. Okay, that's probably the most nerdy thing I've said today, but we'll continue. So with this origin cell, we need to go ahead and, of course, explode the cell that the bomb is on, but we also want to explode the... I'm going to go ahead and show you this. We're, of course, going to explode the cell that the bomb gets placed on, but we also want to explode the 2 cells above this bomb, the 2 cells to the right of this bomb, the 2 down, and 2 to the left. So let's create a function for exploding a particular cell, and then simply call that function with a tiny bit of offset from the origin cell. So one offset on the X, 2 offset on the X, 1 offset on the Y, 2 offset on the Y, and so on. So let's go ahead and create another function in here. This doesn't need to be public. We can just call it, make it a void, a private void, call it explode cell. And this is of course going to take in the cell that we want to explode. So a vector3 int called cell. And here we go ahead and explode the appropriate cell. And the way that we want to do this is first to convert this position or this cell number into an actual tile. So we need to figure out the data of the cell that this that we're trying to explode. So to achieve the tile with a certain cell index, what we do is use tilemap.getTile. And here we feed it simply the cell, so simply the position of the tile. We also need to make sure to convert this, because by default, this is going to give us what is called a tile base. So this is going to give us a tile base, and a tile base is basically just the class that all tile types derive from. So by default right now, Unity just comes with a single tile that derives from tile base, and that's just called tile. It's the basic tile. It has a sprite, a collider, and that's pretty much it, and you can place it in your tile map. But I think with time, Unity is going to be adding multiple kinds of tiles, such as rule tiles, which I've included in this project here, and you can get from a GitHub repository that Unity has made, animated tiles, terrain tiles, all that kind of stuff, as well as you can also create your own tiles that derive from tile base. So that's all good, but tile base doesn't actually give us a lot of information about the tile. In fact, the only thing that it gives us is kind of just a name and the ability to get some more data, but that's all very complicated. Instead, what we want to do is actually retrieve the tile. So we want to be more specific and say, hey, we don't just want to get any tile deriving from tile base. We want to only get a tile, as in the tile that we've gone ahead and created here, the destructible and wall. This is not going to work for rule tile, because rule tiles are also derived from tile base, but they're rule tiles, not just tiles. I know this is very confusing, but we want to get the destructible and wall tiles, and so we want to be specific that we want to get a tile, and so we can actually specify that right here. We want to get a tile of the type tile. And if you wanted to get a rule tile, you can get a tile of the type rule tile. So this is where you specify what you want to get. So we want to get a tile, and we'll call it tile, and it's going to be of type tile, 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 tile. Jesus with this tiling, tile, tile. So now that we've gotten the tile at the right position, what we want to do is do some checking on this. We want to check, is this a wall tile, in which case we want to stop the explosion right there? Is this a destructible tile, in which case we want to go ahead and, well, destroy it? And we can even check if the tile simply doesn't exist. So in order to do that, what we want to do is simply go up here and create a few references. We want to create a reference to the destructible tile as well as the wall tile, so that we can compare the tile that we want to explode to those two and check if they're the same. So here we can create a public tile, and we'll call this wall tile, as well as a public tile that we'll call destructible tile. And then down here we can simply check if the tile that we're looking at, so if tile is equal to wall tile, well then we don't want to do anything because we cannot destroy walls, so we're simply going to return out of the function. We can also check if the tile is equal to a destructible tile, in which case we are going to go ahead and actually change the tile to remove, actually we're not just going to change it, we're going to remove the tile. I'm going to show you how to do that in a second. And then finally, if it's not a wall tile, but if it's a destructible tile or there is no tile, well then we want to go ahead and create an explosion on the tile, and then we can simply end the function. So this is how we would kind of construct it. This is how we can get a tile and find out what tile we're working with. And in the case that we want to destroy the tile, what we do is using tilemap.setTile. And this is pretty much the equivalent of the function up here. Here we get a tile at a certain position. Here we set a tile at a certain position. And first we give it the position, so cell. And then we give it the new tile that we want it to be. So here we could set it to a wall tile if we wanted to. We could set it to a destructible tile, any other tile if you reference it, or we could simply set it to null in order to remove it. And that's what we want to do here. So if we save this, we should actually be able to call this function. And let's actually just try and do that. So for now, we can maybe just call it on the origin cell. So up here we can say explode cell, and we just want to explode our origin cell. If we now save this and go into Unity and we select our grid, and under our map destroyer, we should get three fields here. The first one is we need to reference our tile map gameplay. The second is we want a reference to a wall tile as well as a destructible tile. And if we now play, we should see that if I place a bomb here, right on top of some dirt, it should remove that dirt. I don't know why it didn't remove that dirt. Oh, because we also need to, of course, call this function. I'm being stupid. So we actually also need to go into our bomb. And instead of just debug.logging boom, we need to call this explode function. And for now, we can just use find object of type map destroyer in order to get a reference to this script, and then simply use dot explode, and then we'll give it our current position. So transform dot position. Of course, I would recommend you to use a singleton here instead. I've shown you how to create very simple singleton patterns before. If you want to know more about what singletons are, I'll also have a link for that in the description if you're watching on YouTube. But it's basically just a more efficient way of getting a reference to a script that only exists once inside the scene. And that's a very complicated sentence, but basically it's more performant than this line of code right here. So I would recommend you add that, but this is not what the video is about. So we're just going to do it this way and find the object each time. So now we call explode on the map destroyer every time our bomb is ready to explode. If we save that and hit play, we should now be able to do the thing that I was trying to do before, which is place a bomb on top of some destructible piece of environment, and it should remove it. If we place it on some dirt, nothing happens. And if we place it on a wall, nothing happens. So it only destroys destructible tiles. And that's because inside of our function in the map destroyer, it checks if the tile is a destructible tile, and if it is, it removes it. So it says something about this working. Let's also go ahead and create an explosion each time, just to make this more visible. And I think it's going to help us when we try and explode more cells. So to create an explosion, we really just need a reference to a prefab that we can spawn in. And we can go ahead and create that here. So we'll create a public game object, and we'll call it explosion prefab. And then down here, when we want to create the explosion, we first want to change the cell here to a world position. So we can use tilemap dot cell to world, and we'll give it our cell here. And then we actually also need to offset this a little bit. And before we use this, let me find it here, this get cell center world. And I think we need to use that also here actually instead. So let's use dot get cell center world. Yes. Yes, this is what we need to use. And here we simply input this cell. Cool, that's the right function, because this will get the center of the cell, and this is where we want to instantiate our explosion. So this is going to be a vector3 that we'll call position. We'll set it equal to the result there. And then we can instantiate an explosion prefab at the position with no rotation, so quaternion.identity. Let's save that, go into Unity, select our grid, wait for it to refresh here. There we go. Now we can drag in a prefab, but of course we need to create this explosion prefab. And I've gone ahead and imported some sprites for the explosion here as well. By the way, all these sprites here, the dirt, explosion, and wall, are also included in some of the Unity example scenes. So they're created by Unity. So in here, we can go to the sprite editor, and as you can see, it's automatically laid out all the individual sprites for this explosion. So, oops. And if we close the sprite editor, we can see each of them here. And in order to make an animation out of these, we simply need to select all of them by holding down Shift and drag them into our hierarchy. And this is going to prompt us to create an animation. Let's create a new folder for this, which we'll call animation. And let's call it the explosion animation. Let's save. And now it creates this explosion_0 object. We're simply going to rename this to explosion. There we go. And if we go into the animation window, we can go window, animation. There we go. We can now scrub through and see the animation as it plays. And we can just hit play here if you want to preview it in real time. So now we have an animation. I just want to make sure that at the end here, we add a final keyframe that gets rid of the smoke so that when it plays all the way through, it disappears. So I'm just going to hit record here, go place it right at the end of our animation, and go ahead and set the sprite to none. And so now it should insert so that if we play through the animation and it ends here, there we go, it's gone. And finally, we can go under the animation here and select the clip, explosion, there we go, explosion. And we want to disable loop time. So now our animation won't loop, it will just play once, and then it won't be visible anymore. So now we have our explosion, and we can actually go ahead and make a prefab out of this as well. And we can remove it from our scene. And now, if we go under our grid and drag in our explosion prefab that we just created, hit play, and place a bomb somewhere in our scene, we should see, there we go, we now have an explosion effect. And of course, it's currently only right on top of the bomb, but we can simply go ahead and call the same explode cell function, just like we do here, and then simply offset it to the up, to the right, to the left, and down in order to create more explosions of the same kind. And we can do this really easily. But first, I just want to have a look at the chat here to see how everyone is doing. Looks good. I hope you guys are able to follow along. I know this video is kind of all over the place right now, but the tilemap system is all new and interesting, and I thought I would cover as much as possible. Really don't mind it if you aren't able to follow along with everything. You'll learn with time. This is really just an introduction. But yeah, it looks like everything is good in the chat, so we can go ahead and continue. And so I wanted to go ahead and call the explode cell here and then simply offset it to go up and to the right and down and to the left. And to do this, we can simply copy this explode cell call and then simply add a tiny offset onto our origin cell position. So we'll do plus new vector3 int, and here we can then offset it on the x, y, and z. So and of course, first we want to go ahead and offset it by 1 on the x, 0 on the y, and 0 on the z. And we can go ahead and copy this a bunch of times. So then we want to go 2 on the x. Then we want to go 0 on the x and 1 on the y. Then we want to go 0 on the x and 2 on the y. And you're kind of getting the system here. However, we don't want to offset it on the z because we're not really working with depth in that way. Instead, what we want to do is offset it by -1 and -2 on the x, and then do the same thing on the y here. So -1 on the y and -2 on the y. In other words, +1 +1 on the y, +1 +2 on the x, -1 -2 on the y, -2 1 -2 on the x. So that's how we are getting this pattern. And we should now see actually that if we just save this and go in and play and place a bomb, it should work right off the bat. So if we place a bomb here now, we get this lovely explosion effect. It removes the part of the environment that we want. Whoops, I shouldn't place it on top of that, but you can see it working. The only problem with this is that if we place it somewhere where it should actually be blocked by a wall, say here, you can see that the explosion doesn't actually trigger on the wall, but it goes through to the other side. And this is of course not something we want. We want walls to be able to block an explosion. So how do we do that? Well, we can actually do it fairly simply. We can do it by using a return type to this function. In other words, instead of returning nothing, we'll go ahead and return a bool. And this bool is going to indicate whether or not the explosion was blocked by a wall. So in the case that we hit a wall tile, we're going to return false, because the explosion didn't happen here, and so we don't want it to continue. In the case that we didn't, in other words, we reach this point in the code, we're going to return true, because the explosion did happen and we didn't hit a wall, and so we want the explosion to continue. So this bool here is just, do we want to continue our explosion in the given direction? And we can then use that up here. So this actually gives a bool now. We can use collect it in, or we can store it as a bool variable called should continue, and set it equal like that, and then we can use an if statement. But we don't actually need to store each one of them in a variable. Instead, we can simply do an if statement and then wrap the explosion in that. And I know it looks kind of confusing, but this actually does the same thing. So right here we are calling the explode cell, and we're saying that if it returns true, well then we want to go ahead and explode the next cell in the same direction. And we want to go ahead and do that for each given direction. So if explode cell on the Y here is true, well then we want to explode the second cell on the Y. And we just go through and do this for each one of them. So if, whoops, don't want to manually write this when you can do that. If explode cell on negative X here, we'll want to explode the second one. And if explode cell on the first, negative Y, well then we want to explode the second cell on the negative Y. There we go. And that should actually do all of the appropriate checking for us. Of course, you could use raycasts and colliders and complicate yourself in all kinds of ways, but this does the exact same thing. And sometimes this is what you have to do. If you're used to working with Unity and kind of thinking about these problems in an abstract, three-dimensional way, such as we need to determine if something is blocking this explosion, we send out a ray to determine this. Much of this stuff can be avoided if you just take a step back and look at the problem and say, well, everything is on a grid, and that just simplifies so many things. So here we got away by using not using raycasts and simply writing out some of this code. And it's actually very effective because we're only returning a boolean here, so it shouldn't really cost too much performance-wise. Yeah, as you can see, I'm pretty satisfied with this piece of code. So let's go ahead and hit play. And now we should see that if we place it, say here, it should get blocked here. And indeed it does. If we place it between two walls, the explosion doesn't go through. And that's actually the end of what I wanted to show you. We can now place bombs all over the place and they should interact appropriately. You can also see that the bomb right now doesn't trigger if an explosion hits it. You can have some bombs trigger other bombs if that's something you want. We can also just change the order so it doesn't look bad as it does right now. So in here, the bomb currently has an order in layer of 1. Let's go ahead and set the explosions order in layer 2, 3. So now the explosion overlays all of the objects, and we should see that if we place two bombs next to each other, it looks a bit better when they explode. So yeah, that's just a tiny fix. Really from here, it's up to you to go ahead and add some kind of character controller. And you can make him rigid body enabled because everything is set up to work with colliders. It's about adding power-ups. We have a video on YouTube that we did recently on creating power-ups for games. So if that's something you want to add to your game, definitely check out that video. And if you have any more questions about tile maps, I also did a video specifically on creating and modifying tile maps in Unity and creating your own custom tiles, importing tile sets. So if you want to use your own sprites and not my example project here, definitely check out that video as well. So I think that's pretty much all the video shoutouts that I could think of right now. And yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I think it was a pretty exciting little project to make. And it's something that I've been wanting to do ever since I heard Unity was working on a tile map system. I thought, Bomberman, this will be the bomb. No pun intended. So, cool. Yeah, that's pretty much the end of the road for the tutorial. I think we are ready to go to the Q&A. So, hello everyone in chat. I am now ready to do more talking. Luckily, I've got some water with me. And at this point, you are completely free. Blah. Can't talk anymore. Feel free at this point to ask questions. I will do my best to answer them. Anything at all. Try and avoid duplicate questions. Try and avoid spamming them. In fact, don't spam at all. Yeah, just ask away. I'm here. Cool. So I'm gonna take a sip of water. And I hope you guys have some questions for me. They can be technical, non-technical, personal. Why are you using vector3int instead of vector2int? That's a good question. The reason why is that inside of the, or using the tilemap API, things actually come back with the C position as well. And I think this has to do with ordering 4 different tiles on the same layer. I think you're able to do something along those lines. I'm not completely sure, but for some reason it does return a vector3int with the Z position. In our example, everything is at 0, so I'm sure that you could use vector2int and it would automatically convert it to that. Just didn't see a reason to. How should I start at learning low poly modeling in Blender? Well, I actually do have a tutorial series on creating a low poly model that is game ready in Blender, so you can check that out. But really it's just about starting to create some of these things, just downloading Blender, open it up, be a complete idiot and don't know where anything is, and just take it from there. It's about practice, really. But there are some really good Blender tutorials online, not only the series that I did. Hey Brackeys, do you have some good links about the LL API of Unity networking? Oh, I'm sorry, not off the top of my head, no. What is your call on using interfaces in a Unity game? I use them for some of my games. I think interfaces for me is I should word this differently. I normally only use interfaces very rarely. And the reason why is that when I make a game, most of the time it's smaller projects and it's game jam projects or tutorial projects. And in those, it's not often that I need the functionality of interfaces, because most of what interfaces are used for are writing solid code, especially if you have a large code base or if you're working multiple people on a project. It often doesn't make sense if you're trying to do something as quickly as possible, and so I don't often use them. But they can be really, really useful. They can also be a trap. So they're great if you know what you're doing. Would you like to create a video tutorial on Photon multiplayer? Maybe at some point. I heard Photon is great. Are you going to make a chess game in the next live stream? Because I think it's an easy thing to make. Chess could be fun. I've never thought of it as easy, but I guess with this tilemap system it wouldn't be that hard. That's actually a very good idea. I will write it down. No promises, but I'll write it down. Do you make an Android tutorial? I try not to make platform-specific tutorials too much. Do you publish games? I don't publish finished games, no. I do create smaller projects for tutorials and game jams. If you want to check out my games, you can go to the Ludum Dare website or just search for Brackeys Ludum Dare, and they should appear. How about footprint tutorial? That could definitely be exciting. Creating some kind of custom shader for that could be fun. Are you going to make some Android tutorial? Again, same thing as before. Can you make a bazooka tutorial? Wow, bazookas could be cool. I really want to do that. I don't think I think it's a bit too close to something I've done before. I've created a tutorial on creating grenades in Unity that actually destroys part of the environment. So I think you could check that out, and then simply, instead of having a grenade model, just have a missile model that just shoots through the level with some particles and something. It's pretty much the same thing. Do you have any idea to do tutorials on an open world game? No, that is simply too complex and requires way too much asset creation. Will you do some tutorials on databases? If I was better at databases, I probably would. However, anything it depends on if you mean local or network databases. Anything networked is something I suck at. Local databases, there are a bunch of stuff that you can do there with JSON, XML, or scriptable objects. I already have a tutorial on scriptable objects that I suggest you check out if you want to create a local database, or just easy way of storing or creating data objects in Unity. You can check out my scriptable objects video, but networked, probably not right now. Can you do some advanced 2D tutorials? I don't know about you guys, but I thought this was fairly advanced. I know that there's a lot more that you can do with the Tilemap system, but it's probably just because I've never used it before. But I was researching this and I was confused at some points, mostly with the relationship between tiles and how you're supposed to go about everything. Yeah, I would love to do some more advanced stuff at some point. Do you have any idea to make basic copy protection for Unity games? Nope. Sorry. Why gravity not working with animator component? If you're over, I don't know, this completely depends on the setup of your project, but if you are overriding positions of a game object, then physics aren't going to work. You can physics enable your animations so that physics get applied on top of your animations. You shouldn't be modifying the root position of your object anyways through animation. That is my answer. Can you do a 2D tutorial in the style of Castle Crashers, Don't Starve, / Don't Starve, where there is some depth? Not completely sure what you mean, but those games are awesome, and I could maybe do something along those lines. Yeah. What is the best way to make endless runner and spawn objects? Pools? Yes. Object pools are basically made for endless runners. They are the best example of where you could use object pools. So definitely check out my new video on object pooling. Yay! And if you want to learn about some of the other stuff on creating an endless runner, check out the How to Make a Video Game series, which shows that. Can you test our games? We were actually talking about doing a live stream earlier today after Ludum Dare, where I play your games. An entire live stream reserved for questions and answers and just having fun and playing some of the games that you guys create. That is something that I really want to do. So I'll try to make or to set that up. Only if you guys want to see it. Let me know actually right now. Is that something you would like to see, where we just take some time, an hour or so, where we sit down and chill, and you guys send me some of the games that you make, and I can maybe give some feedback and try them out and suck at them live and embarrass myself and go cry in a corner. Now that I think about it, it sounds great. Do you want to create a shader tutorial series? Yes, especially with the new shader graph. I've never been a technical artist per se, and so my shader writing knowledge is limited. I do know some stuff, but not all of it, definitely. I would love to cover the new shader graph, because I think it's going to be pretty much the standard of how people are going to be making shaders in Unity soon. Yeah, I don't see a lot of people scripting their own shaders with this new tool. Vegetation and realistic environment on Unity. That's something that could be really interesting. Doing something, some of this photogrammetry stuff in Unity, showing off stuff like megascans, or doing a video on PBR and some of those rendering techniques. But a lot of this stuff is happening to Unity right now, especially with the scriptable render pipeline. So I wouldn't want to go too much into detail before we know kind of how SRP is going to turn out and how the new graphics workflow in Unity is going to be. Things are still kind of unknown because things are in early beta and so. Do you have any recommendations for someone wanting to study in Denmark coming from Portugal? Recommendations. Yeah, I think what I would probably do is try and go to people in order to make friends, because we Danes, we tend to kind of not be too good at being the ones that has the incentive to, you know, actually go and talk to people. We tend to kind of shield ourselves and only talk to the ones that we know, and only talk to ourselves if we are weird like I am. And then but really most people, if you just come and talk to them, they enjoy it. We do enjoy it, we just don't do it. I don't know why. So that would probably be the main thing, is just go and talk to people. That way you're going to have friends, because otherwise, yeah. And go to social events. Try and find some circles of people that you think could be like-minded. I think that's probably the main thing moving to another country, is try and build a network. What do you recommend for learning more about shaders? Right now there are, of course, a bunch of good resources for shader writing. I would mostly recommend stuff like Cat-like Coding, Alan Sacconi, and Making Stuff Look Good on YouTube. Those are my 3. Can you make a tutorial for survival games? I already have a huge series on creating a survival game in Unity, guys. Come on. It's like 35 videos long or something. And I'm not going to touch it anymore. I'm sorry. It's too old. It's outdated. And I think it's more exciting to do different kind of projects. You can go watch that to get some inspiration at least. I'm sorry that it's old and in JavaScript, but yeah. But really a survival game is in many ways the same as kind of a mix between a first-person shooter and an RPG. So you can check out my multiplayer FPS tutorial and my RPG tutorial and try and combine the two in a way that makes sense. That would probably be my recommendation. What games do you play yourself? I play a lot of games. I don't have time to play them, but I try and play a lot of games, is what I should say. So right now, or for a long time now, my big passion has been CSGO, Counter-Strike Global Offensive. It's just so fun. And I'm kind of a social gamer. Most of the time when I play, it's with friends, and it's such a fun competitive game. So we play that a lot. Historically, I've played a huge amount of World of Warcraft. If I was able to take all the hours that I put into World of Warcraft and put them into a actually useful skill, I would be the world's best guitarist. But yeah, those are 2 that I've spent a lot of time on. But also try and play smaller games. I just replayed Super Meat Boy, which was really fun. I haven't played that for a very long time. And recently I played all the way through Ori and the Blind Forest, which is such a good game. I couldn't recommend it enough, and I'm looking so much forward to Will of the Wisps, the second one. And also I just picked up the new Dragon Ball game, Fighters, with the Z. That's really, really fun. Actually, it's the best one in a while, I think, and I really love the way that they've shifted to kind of a locked 2.5D perspective, much in the same way that the old fighting games like Street Fighter work, because I thought before the 3D element didn't really work for me. I liked it to be kind of simple, and it is now, and it's just, yeah, incredibly fun and competitive. So check that out. Which one is better, pixel art or low poly 3D? Completely depends on the game. That's pretty much all there is to say. Are there going to be any more Blender tutorials? If you guys want them. Is there something similar to C++ custom header files in Unity C#? No. Can you make a video about game optimization, some best practices? That would be really fun, and it's something that I've had on my list for a long time. It's something, yeah, I would love to do like top 5 performance or optimization tips in Unity and just delve into some different things that normally can be applied, or some techniques that can normally be applied to most projects in order to make them run better. That would definitely be fun. One of the big ones is, of course, object pooling that I just covered in a separate video, but also just kind of naming some of these things. Yeah, I would love to do that. Why don't you apply for a job at Unity? Because I don't really want to work at Unity. Not that it doesn't seem like a great place to work, but because I really want to keep doing this, and this is really fun. And I like the independence. So being able to do this at home with some awesome people like Sofia and Thomas is really just the biggest gift. So yeah. Why not use a for loop for the explosions in the Bomberman tutorial? I don't, there's probably some way to do that, but I don't really see it being simpler because we have to offset them in different ways. Yeah, no. To those of you guys talking about a Discord server, there is an unofficial Discord created by some guys from the forum that is really awesome, and we are talking about kind of promoting it some more. So if you guys want to hang out and do some real-time chat with the game development community, definitely go there. I'm sure that the awesome admins will put a link in the chat right now. That would be great. Just, yeah, a lot of awesome developers there. All right, so I think we're going to be wrapping up questions now because my throat is getting sore and I do have more stuff to do today. Unfortunately, work awaits. Yeah, so final questions, and we'll go ahead and wrap this up. So do you have a team development or do you do it solo? We are 3 people. I, of course, do all the recording stuff, as you can see. But we also have Thomas, which is our main video editor. He does most or close to all of our video editing, and he's become really good at it. I hope you guys recognize that as well. The videos require way more editing now, especially the ones that are pre-scripted with B-roll and everything. So he pretty much does all of that. And then we have Sofia, which does all of the video planning. She's also used to do a bunch of editing and has been doing that for a very long time now. But yes, she does all the planning. She sets up sponsorship deals, and stuff like that. I don't know if you guys have noticed it, but we have been having a few sponsors lately, and she's able to find really good ones. It's always tech related. We had some sponsorships with Udemy, with Unity, with Skillshare, and yeah, more coming. So that's really awesome. And yes, it just kind of, makes Thomas and I follow the schedule. So without her, everything would, crumble. And yeah, sometimes they also, Sofia and Thomas also help in scripting the videos. So yeah, we have 3 people at the moment, and which is really fun because doing something alone is fun. Doing it with friends, even more fun. Can you do a Worms-like game tutorial? Maybe at some point. Can you make a tutorial on RTS game with a simple API? I've talked about RTS before. It's too complicated. I do want to go ahead and create some kind of RTS related videos because some of the things are interesting, but creating an entire RTS game is way too complicated for a tutorial series. Turn-based castle game. That sounds really fun. Have you ever thought of doing a 2D top-down shooter? I have done one. It was fun. It's called Wave Incoming. It's on my GitHub, so if you want to check it out, it's there. I hate spamming. Please tell me how to market games free and paid. I actually have no idea. My way of marketing my game when I was making games and thought that I wanted to be a game developer was creating a YouTube channel and doing tutorials. So I don't, the tutorial part turned out pretty well, the game part not so much. So and now I'm here, so I wouldn't really know too much about that, but it's really about figuring out where is your audience and trying to tap into those to the streams available for that audience. So in my case, I thought my audience, because my game was about making games, thought would be game developers. And so I thought I would try and tap into Unity users and with tutorials. So that's kind of how I got rolling. So that's my thought process, at least. Why Facebook plus Twitter but not Instagram? Because I just don't use Instagram. I don't know how it works. I've never used it. Is it good? I don't know. Did you create any games with mechanics like in the Sims series? Not really. Can you make a vegetation tutorial in Unity? Yes, that would be fun. Will you make a tutorial on mobile game controls? I try not to do too much platform specific stuff, but maybe mobile game controls could be fun. There are a lot of great, also free assets for that. Can you make an advanced 2D platformer character controller? Not right now, it's not on the roadmap. There are a bunch of stuff on the asset store. Check that out. Do you plan to do a video about the new C# job system and entities components? They seem to be awesome. If I'm able to figure them out, when they come out, yes. Otherwise, I might just leave that to you, Kim. So yeah, okay. Can you make a tutorial to create Portal? I have a Portal tutorial on the YouTube on creating this cool Portal effect. Not the entire game, but I'm sure you can figure something out based on that. Snow/sand real-time displacement tutorial. That sounds fun. A lot of graphic stuff, guys. I would love to do some more graphic stuff, especially with the new shader editor. And I think we are going to close it here. All right. Questions are up. We're closing it. It's a wrap, guys. No more questions being answered. Yes, my voice is getting sore. It's too much. Cool. That's pretty much it. That was the live stream, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. Other than that, I just want to say thank you so much for supporting, guys. You guys are awesome. If you want to see more live streams like this, if you want to see more videos, if you want to just see more from us in general, the best place to go is to patreon.com/Brackeys. You can make a donation there. It's reoccurring. So every month you're going to donate some amount. You choose the amount and you can cancel it whenever you want. It's a great way to also become a part of the Patreon community, which is awesome. And to make sure that we keep making the stuff that we're making right now, especially now that we're multiple people. It means that we can churn out a lot more content and that it's a lot more well edited and produced. But it also means that, of course, we have multiple mouths to feed. So thanks to all the guys who are supporting on Patreon. I'm just going to give you a link in the chat here, patreon.com/Brackeys. If you guys want to go there, at least check it out. On that, thanks to all the awesome supporters, Patreon supporters or not, you guys rock. And I hope you guys enjoyed the live stream. I had a lot of fun. I really like this one. So yeah, I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye guys. Bye everyone. Thanks to all the awesome Patreon supporters who donated in January, and a special thanks to Sean Carey, Diego Geik, Judeman, Diane Guyen, Beffio, Infinity PPR, Yorai Omer, Cyborg Mummy, Derek Keemskirk, Murr, Faisal Marify, Beardo Die, John Ramirez, Double Tap 45, James P, Superman the Great, John Beauregard, Jason Latito, Alex Rakitsky, Björn Furuknapp, Suni Jakobsen, James Rogers, Robert Bund, Rob Farron, and Erasmus.